Please be seated. As with all council meetings, this extraordinary meeting is also being filmed. Do we have any apologies, please?
We do, Madam Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Ashwell, Councillor Bart, Councillor Haynes Kate, Councillor Hayden-Taylor, Councillor Haynes Mike, Councillor Housel, Councillor Holdsworth, Councillor Jerome, Councillor Lloyds, Councillor Pitts, Councillor Shepherd-Bay, Councillor Singleton, Councillor Soane, Councillor Swadall Paul, Councillor Tomlin, Councillor Weeks, Councillor Eunice.
Any declaration? Yes, please.
I've had an email from Guy Grandison. He's... can you hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, yeah. Guy Grandison sent his apologies. He was caught up with a business contract and missed his 5:50 train.
Thank you. Any other apologies? No. Okay, declarations of interest, please. Yes?
I have a non-pecuniary interest. My daughter works for a company that may be up for discussion here this evening.
Okay, would all of you hear that?
No.
Would you mind repeating it?
My daughter works for a company that does. My daughter works for a company that works for the council that does the promotion for Wokingham Town Centre regeneration, and the subject may be coming up this evening. Thank you.
Public question time. Have we received any public questions? Councillor Bray, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first thing is to explain why we've called an extraordinary council meeting in January, to ask for an ordinary meeting in January instead of just calling an ordinary meeting. And the reason is that we can't call an ordinary meeting. The schedule of meetings is set every year by a vote of the council, and once it's set, it can't be altered to add meetings, except by another vote of the council. The schedule of meetings for this municipal year did not include a January meeting, so we can't add one now. But we can call what's known as an extraordinary meeting, so that's what we've done. And again, for the uninitiated, anybody who watches a film of this, because this is an extraordinary meeting, it can only discuss one item of business, and that item of business cannot be motions. The item of business on the agenda is to change the schedule of meetings to add a January council meeting, and that is what I will be proposing as a recommendation, which I believe has been circulated to everybody. We are not calling for a meeting just for this January to allow us to discuss our motions that were not taken in November. Neither do we want to hold a meeting in January by moving one of the other meetings, which are, just for the record, the annual meeting in May, normal meetings in July, September and November, the budget meeting in February, and a normal meeting in March. That's only 6 meetings, at 2 of which normal business is restricted. One more to plug a long gap is hardly an outrageous request. We are asking for a permanent change to add a meeting in January. We used to have a January meeting until 2012. Up until then, the problem was that we had a long gap elsewhere in the calendar, as we didn't have a March council meeting. And February has restrictions on what business can be conducted because of the budget. So we asked for an extra meeting in March to plug the gap between January and July without questions and motions. So the Conservatives agreed to add a meeting in March, but took away the January meeting, which opened a different gap. There will always be a gap until we add a meeting in January. Without a January meeting, there are fewer opportunities for residents to put questions or submit petitions, some of which may be time limited and can't wait until February. And there is no chance for councillors to ask things on behalf of residents between November and March, or to raise motions. Not having to answer questions or debate issues might suit the administration very well, but we think that accountability is important. The fact is, our current system is unsatisfactory. We need a January council meeting, and therefore I would like to propose the resolution that we have in front of us, which is basically, I won't read it all out, but to add an additional council meeting to the timetable of meetings for this year, to be held on a date later this month, to be agreed, and that in future we will include a January council meeting every year. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Would you like to speak now?
I was there.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Right. Councillor Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's really sad that we're all here on a Friday evening when we really should be at home with our families. The rationale for this is the fact that the November council meeting ran out of time to address all the motions in the agenda. These motions, and I quote, were time sensitive and had to be debated before March. So let's have more meetings. So what actually happened in November? It had an unusually busy agenda with a serious petition and a presentation from the Chief Constable, so time was always going to be tight. And Councillor Bray, an experienced councillor, would have been fully aware of this. On the basis of the agenda, time allocations, it was going to be impossible to start the motions before 10 p.m. It is incumbent on the leader of any party to recognise this and prioritise the activities of their members to concentrate on what they believe are important. If motions were the most important, then the objective would be to save time in other parts of the agenda so that the motions time slot could be increased. There were only a handful of opportunities to do this, largely around questions. And this is what I did with my members, resulting in only 3 questions being asked to allow the extra time on the motions. In contrast, Councillor Bray accepted a grand total of 10 questions. If these had been removed, I estimate it would have freed up 30 to 40 minutes to cover some additional motions. Now let's move on to the motions themselves. Even with a 30-minute extension, the average time for the 6 motions would only be 10 minutes, which is woefully inadequate. That will only allow 3 people to speak, which includes the proposer and seconder. This has never happened, so several of these motions would always fall whatever happened. It is almost as if a conscious decision was made to pack all the relevant agenda items to manufacture a time issue, which could then be used to issue press releases and newsletters on this. Moving on to the time-sensitive nature of the meetings, let's look at the motions. The first motion about devolution is hardly time-sensitive and will clearly depend on the outcome of the general election. The second motion about regeneration of Elmsfield and Carnival Pool suggested consultation on the plans plus a request for overview and scrutiny to look at the project structure. Neither of these are time sensitive and both can be done outside a full council. The next motion is about customer service, and again, I struggled to work out what the time sensitive issues were here. Fourth motion, about the Hurst Golf Course, had actually already been addressed in answer to a question from the proposer of the motion earlier in the agenda, so nothing was lost here. Finally, the last motion was about passing on a particular future grant to towns and parishes. This grant will be available in 2016. Clearly not time sensitive. We have coped without the January meeting in previous years. The reason why we had a problem here is that the agenda was deliberately packed. Not one of these motions can remotely be considered to be time sensitive. If you put this together with the high volume of questions, it is clear to me the opposition were playing games. For this reason, I will not support the recommendation for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gilder, please.
Thank you. We have to have a special council executive every year anyway to agree the council tax base, and always will have to, as it has to be agreed by council before the budget meeting. But information for the item is not available in time for a council meeting in November. Special council executives involve only a small number of councillors to take decisions that should be made by the whole council. They are meant to be held when there is something urgent and unplanned, not as a matter of routine to deal with something that is known about well in advance, as is happening. The additional cost of a council meeting as compared to a special council executive is mainly councillor travel expenses. Agendas, etc. still need preparing and issuing, staff still need to attend, filming still needed, building still open and heated. If we need a date for this year, we could use the one already set up for the special council executive on the 29th. May need to start executive meeting earlier, but there is time to organise that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pauline Jurgensen, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was interested to see this motion from the opposition asking for additional council meetings between November and March to allow extra opportunity for member questions and motions. As each council meeting costs thousands of pounds, I did some investigation to ensure the requirement is really related to transparency. Firstly, questions. There are many opportunities which councils and the public can take advantage of to ask public and board questions. Not only at 5 of the 6 full council meetings last year, but also the executive, of which there were 9 last year. Questions can also be asked to audit, any of the scrutiny committees, health and wellbeing board, licensing and indeed personnel board on the scope of these committees. Given that exec, for example, is often quite short, the questions have never been limited by the chairman, and other committees have no questions, I would suggest there's plenty of opportunities to ask questions without having extra meetings. Indeed, if the objective is to get an answer rather than grandstand the point in front of the press, then they can simply contact the executive member, officer or chairman of the board in question. To turn to the second point about Liberal motions running out of time, I again wondered why the meeting in November had so many motions. It appears the opposition made no attempt to manage or prioritise these motions. Although I was looking forward to the motion on devolution, I had a speech prepared. I must say it was strange that Liberals chose this as their priority motion, given that we have no jurisdiction on the matter at all. They could have withdrawn it to allow more important items to be covered, unless it was just Liberal Democrat Party instructions to get the motion into everybody they could without considering the relevance or urgency. I then looked at the other motions. The one on customer service was at best a question. I actually answered it during the executive questions anyway. And if the Liberals had been actually interested in the answer, it would have been much more efficient to write to me rather than submitting a motion. Looking at the full council meetings since November, there have been 7 full council meetings plus an extraordinary meeting. At 5 of these meetings, motion could be submitted. In November, there were 5 motions, at least 2 of which were not urgent, or not even suitable as motions. In September, there was only 1 motion, and the meeting finished at 9:10. In July, there were 2, and the meeting finished at 9:55. In March, there were 3, all of them from the Conservatives, non-Liberal. And in November 13, there was 1 motion, and the meeting finished at 9:35. So I would suggest there is plenty of opportunity for questions. The reason we ran out of time for motions in November has more to do with poor management of time and priority and relevance by the Lib Dem group than anything else. The rush of motions in November is more to do with grandstanding and the commencement of the election period than urgency or priority, as my friend has suggested, and that local residents would prefer us to spend money on essential services rather than unnecessary meetings. Therefore, I cannot support the motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Becker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you know, at last year's budget meeting, there were several other members of council business that had to be put on the agenda at short notice. We had to shoehorn in adoption of the MDD, the homelessness strategy, the Treasury Management Strategy mid-year report. Wouldn't it have been better to do it in January when time to adjust the strategy for the next year before the budget meeting? We had to appoint a new Director of Children's Services, changes to the Constitution, adding someone to the Independent Remuneration Panel and the timetable of meetings, that is, 2 strategic documents that didn't get proper debate because of time, and a whole load of other stuff, which year on year has been added into the budget meeting at short notice. Those could have formed a proper meeting agenda and been discussed properly had your administration got it back together and had things in a timely manner.
Thank you. Councillor Argan, please.
Thank you. I too find it quite frustrating to have to come to meetings unexpectedly. But this programme that we are discussing for the future allows any potential for unexpected things to be dealt with in a timely manner, to allow opposition members, the public, to review the work we do. It is not just about making life easy for the ruling group or even for the officers. It is actually about giving the public the opportunity and the time to actually question us and look and scrutinise what we do. The Hurst Golf Course example, effectively was kept out, done semi-secretly without any notice. The public had very little time to get themselves organised and galvanise themselves. We have other examples where the support grant for the towns and parishes, that could have quite easily have been discussed and organised before the budget cycle, but again that's going to have to disappear because there isn't going to be enough time. There's a whole bunch of relevant issues and subjects which aren't just for members to discuss. There's opportunities for the public to participate in our meetings, and sometimes the shoehorning in of agenda items pushes and challenges us as members and our ability to scrutinise properly. All we're saying to you is we hear that time management is an issue, but there's consistent pressures year on year on year. We're just saying get organised ahead of schedule. You don't need to have an extraordinary executive meeting. You could actually have just an ordinary meeting of the council, and then you could make everything public. That's all we're saying. It is not rocket science. We're not asking for a meeting every week. One extra meeting a year should be enough. Now, as far as Lib Dems swamping the agenda, well, that's really nice of you to say so. And quite frankly, I failed to see how we could possibly swamp the agenda when everybody knew that there was no way with the chief, or now the ex-chief, actually coming to speak to us, we would be able to do that. Without her being at that meeting, we may well have easily have covered the time frame within it. But that's okay, she's here to represent the public and talk to the public. And we, as the public's representative, have a duty to hear it. And it's probably a good idea that she comes to us and says to us at a full council meeting what her issues are, and we question and scrutinise her. But all we're saying to you is, rather than squashing in and forever frustrating the system, why not just simply have another meeting, allow everybody to do the things that you're supposed to do? Because after all, our job is to hold you to account. That's our statutory requirement. And that's all we're trying to do. If you want to frustrate that, go ahead and frustrate it. That's up to you. We can't stop you. We're just trying to say, you should consider this. If you don't, you don't. Because you know what will happen next time? It'll just be the same old, same old. You'll squash everything in, people will get frustrated, and it doesn't really work very well for us as an authority and the public outside. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Stanton, please.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening to you and to members. If I can just make a couple of comments just before I lurch into my 3-hour speech. I just note that of the 5 members who signed the petition for this meeting here tonight, only 3 of them are here. So I question the commitment of those that have signed that. I'll leave it at that. I'd also remind you, Tom, that you've actually already asked questions about the Hurst Golf Course, which has been going on for years anyway, at a recent executive meeting. And the other comment I would make is that I often get the role of the person that sums up opposition comments. And that is true tonight, but I have to say I've had so little of any meaningful evidence of why we should have another meeting.
I'm sorry, Councillor Stanton. You need to present your...
I am. Madam Mayor, it's a pity we've had to come here to try to comment on what I call a frivolous attempt by the opposition and be allowed only 3 minutes to express my concern. Full council is a very serious meeting which should be for vital serious business, not trivia, which we clearly experienced at the last November council meeting, which the leader of the council actually has outlined extremely well. And you'll all be terribly relieved to know I'm not going to repeat it. But the evidence is clear to see if you read the actual agenda, which I still have here in my mitt. It is overpacked deliberately. We have a number of council meetings which are very important, including the annual council, which approves members' work committee for the municipal year to follow, so that they can get on with the excellent work they all do right across the house, I have to say. Further meetings in the summer and the autumn are essential, generally well managed, and an opportunity for democracy for all. and I certainly celebrate them. The all-important February meeting sets out the budget of the council tax levels. These are important businesses of this council. The November agenda was overpacked, much to cause ongoing questions from the opposition, much of the information already being available for any member, from any officer or other member, so you wish to choose it. Take it. There is no there is no reason for this other than to grandstand. And I really think we shouldn't do that. Council is a serious business. Madam Mayor, I think this is more than enough opportunities for members to work together. They've been outlined by Pauline Jorgensen, many other meetings, other opportunities for questions without further council meetings. But I think it is incumbent upon every member in this House to use the time for full council meetings for serious business, not silly questions, and I will put that across the House. Therefore, I do not support the motion for additional council meetings. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I just about made it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Faes.
Thank you. Before I start on what I was going to say, several comments are made about thousands and thousands of pounds for running a council meeting. I think I'll put in a freedom of information request to actually ask how much this meeting has cost. And I would expect it not to be more than a few £100, and it's largely your travel expenses and the documentation. So if there's any other costs, then this council's very inefficient. And I'll pick that up. I'll go on to what I was going to say now. In order for an opposition to fulfil its function, it requires the necessary times and means to undertake this role. At Wokingham, we the opposition have a limited time allocated for this, so it's extremely frustrating when this limited time is further curtailed. At the last council meeting, through a combination of an external speaker and a vote by the Conservative group to stop the meeting at 10:30, none of the motions presented by the Lib Dem group had the opportunity to be heard. The next time we have an opportunity to present a motion, whether we want to represent the ones we've done or not is still the issue, is March 2015, nearly 4 months later. This situation is unsatisfactory and clearly disadvantages us as an opposition. We are therefore asking for an additional full council meeting to be held this January, and also for an additional January meeting then to be included every year in the annual cycle of meetings. Members of the Conservative group might find this amusing, but they would not like it if this happened to them. To me, one of the most important issues is that of common courtesy. The present arrangement falls significantly short of this. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Chapel.
Well, I do apologise, but I'm a little bit confused.
That's okay.
The motion here makes no mention whatsoever of another meeting in January of another year. Are we getting an amendment being presented to us?
No, it is in there, David. You need to read a bit harder.
I'm afraid it does. It says
Exactly.
picture timetable.
That's why I confused you, didn't make the motion. There you go. Yeah. There you go.
Yes, it's just been confirmed that it is correct. The recommendation mentions future timetable. So, thank you.
What is this?
Maybe
that's the motion. Is that an amendment?
No.
Why is it not on the record?
The paper you are referring to is the calling for the extraordinary meeting. The recommendation is the one you have on a separate piece of paper.
So this recommendation therefore has not gone to the other members of the council.
It's been paid.
Respond to that, Madam Mayor. That's a little bit irregular.
Yes, please.
Because it's an extraordinary meeting, it's a bit complicated to work out how we do the resolution on it. We prepared a resolution and we arranged for it to be circulated in advance, so it went out before the meeting, so that you would have sight of it before tonight, and it has been properly tabled in that there's one in front of everybody. If you need 2 minutes to read it harder, I said, but we did not wish to hide it from you. We had given it to Democratic Services and the understanding that we had no problem with it being circulated to you, so that you would know what you were voting for.
Councillor Cowell.
Or against.
Madam Mayor, if I look at the page here where the call and signatures are on, it said to consider the requirement for an additional council meeting in January, etc., and carries on with more information. What's said on the previous page, timetable of meetings, non-specific, I was advised by Democratic Services that the only issue that could be discussed was the item on the agenda. And this council meeting 16th agenda is clearly a very different paper. It's asking for a very different outcome.
Take it up with Democratic Services, because that's what it went through.
I can only apologise if there has been some confusion. It was not our intention to blindside you in any way, shape or form.
I am sorry, I have to reiterate what I said. The motion has been tabled and that it stands alone as a motion, and that is what we are discussing tonight. Sorry, not the motion, the recommendation. And it doesn't matter what it says in here, because the recommendation has been tabled. Councillor Ross.
Madam Mayor, does our standing orders require that the recommendation is given prior notice to the meeting?
No. No, it doesn't.
Which paragraph are you referring to, please?
The fact that a recommendation has only been tabled tonight, Madam Mayor, I'm asking a question in ignorance of the answer.
The answer is no, it hasn't been.
There is no such thing in the standard orders.
Chair, can I just interrupt here a second, please?
I'm not chair.
Okay, fair enough. You have ruled 3 times. How many times more do you have to rule for the ruling group to get the message that the officers have acted appropriately and you have made a decision? If they are challenging your decision, then let them say so, or keep quiet.
Thank you for your comment. Councillor Cowell.
Madam Mayor, the wording on the 60 are actually quite different to those under the amended 60 issue. And the question I would ask is that not an amendment to the motion?
No, it is not. And there is nothing in the standing orders to say that this is not something we can do. The recommendation has been tabled, and I can't see that we benefit from any further discussions. We have nothing to use, if you so like. This has been done in the proper way. The recommendation has been tabled. I can't rule in any other way. Councillor Jørgensen, this is the last comment I'll take.
Could I request that the Standing Orders Working Party is asked to review this? It seems to me, not the actual action, but the standing orders, it seems to me highly undemocratic that members who are not here have an agenda with a different motion on it from the one that is taken tonight. If that's what standing orders say, that's absolutely fine. I'm not challenging your decision, but I think we should straighten out the standing orders so that the information that is circulated in a motion is the same as the motion that's presented on the night, or that if the motion is different on the night, then that becomes an amendment. I'd like to request that, please.
I appreciate your concern, but as it stands, this recommendation has been tabled. This is the recommendation we have to deal with. And
I accept that.
I suggest that you take that comment to the working party and let them look at it. So, shall we continue now then? Councillor Ferris, please. Did you have anything else to add to
No, I
this?
finished, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bray, will you sum up?
Yes, maybe I could start where we left off. This is the first extraordinary council meeting we have had, and therefore we may well trip over issues. There was no intention, I repeat that, we did arrange for the wording in advance. We thought you would have seen it. There was not our intention to conceal it, and I think, well, it's different to all the other things that we do, because normally you have a wording for a recommendation in the agenda. It's not like that. So I think I would be very happy with the Constitution Review Working Group looking to see whether we can improve that process. But there was no intention on our part to have any deception. Okay, so let's start there. The rest of it, not quite so conciliatory. How dare we raise questions and motions at a council meeting? How disgraceful, how shocking. According to Keith, we could have had questions or motions, but not both, because they wouldn't fit in. And according to Pauline, we've got umpteen occasions on which we could have asked multiple questions, but of course, leaving out the fact that we are limited by the Constitution to one question each per meeting, which is not quite such a rosy picture. We did try, when we found out, and we did not know in advance of the November council meeting, only just before the agenda came out, that both the Chief Constable and a petition debate will be taking place at that meeting. That was about as much time as we would have needed to have debated all our motions if we had had the extra half hour on top. We could have got through it all. We didn't. So in a normal circumstance, it would not have been so pressured. It was more difficult. However, we did have the half hour spare, which we could have used to debate at least one motion, if not more, but you voted to go home instead. So I don't really see that. I think you've rather undermined your own argument there. Also, I'm very interested that Keith started his remarks this evening by saying he would rather be at home than here. Well, I'm sure he would, because he wouldn't have to answer questions if he was at home. He wouldn't have to indulge in debates. He wouldn't have to be accountable. Very sad. So, as
Councillor Bray, Councillor Baker, please.
Can I appoint a personal explanation? I'll quote, I said, we are all here on a Friday evening when we should be at home. No. We is the word I use, not I.
No. I'm not sure we should be at home, but never mind. If that's what you said, then it's really good. I would rather be here being accountable and doing what I'm paid for. As for those, the criticism of those who signed the calling notice but are not present, we had no control over when this meeting was going to be held. They didn't know when it was going to be at the point they signed it, and unfortunately both of them have got other commitments for this evening which they cannot break. They would have been here if they could have been. I think we can see which way this debate is going. You don't wish to have another council meeting. That is a great shame, because actually instead we're going to have every year, every January, the additional extraordinary, special council executive to determine the council tax base, as Kay said. We're going to have other items which we shoehorn into the February meeting and don't get a proper discussion. It's not all about what we want to do, it's also about what residents want, what they deserve out of their council. And it's a pity that you can't see that.
Thank you very much. We are now going to vote on the recommendation. All those in favour, please show. Those against, please show.
Shame. Shame.
Right. So the recommendation is defeated. Thank you very much.